Let's name the elephant in the room. I don't always like all of the artwork that I make. I also don't always finish all of the artwork that I start. And I'm guessing as a creative that you've experienced the same thing because this is part of the creative process. Today we're making art prompt cards from old artwork, and I'll be sharing DIY art journal tips, mixed media, and watercolor techniques along the way. And so let's dive in. So before we begin transforming old artwork into inspiration and making art prompt cards, we need to find that work first. So I'm flipping through a Scribble Mindful Art journal that I had really as a practice play journal before I was creating a course on this. And I also have a separate folder that I keep of unfinished artwork as well as scraps and things I'm not liking that I'll show you in a moment as well, that we're going to be using to make our art prompt cards. The nice part about having some similarity in the images you're using is that it can create a really fun series, and you can have themes in your art prompt cards. So you can see I have watercolor scraps, coloring pages, or thicker construction paper. I'm going to show you how you can make art prompt cards from coloring book pages as well, and also from larger art pieces that you might be using. This is a circle paper punch, a 1.5 inch. There are different sizes. You could do a 2.5 inch if you want to make a slightly larger prompt card. And I'm just showing how simple it is. You could also do this with scissors, although it's going to take you so much longer. And if you were to make art prompt cards that were square, let's say, you could do this if you have a paper cutter. And I really enjoy this process of using the punch because it's really satisfying to hear the sound and see each piece come through. But what's really fun and what I love most about this is that you can pick out different things that you're seeing in the image. So it's almost like looking through a viewfinder. It reminds me of my darkroom days and working with photography. And so that's part of the magic of this process for me, is that I really enjoy making these art prompt cards from old artwork because I get to rediscover some of the artwork that I made, what's actually in that image. And so this is watercolor. I did a wet on wet technique and had a lot of the colors blend together. I largely used yellow and blue, and it did form some areas of green. So what's really nice is that as you're looking at the image, you can notice, oh, I really enjoyed working with these types of colors. I really enjoy this particular technique. So what I'm doing right now is I want to get to that middle center part where the yellow is. So if that happens, if you're working with a larger piece of paper, you can just cut and trim it. So one thing to keep in mind as you're making art prompt cards from old artwork is that if the scraps are too small and you're using this type of circle paper punch, you're not going to be able to use all of your scraps. So in this case, I had a couple pieces that were too thin. I could use them somewhere else, maybe in a collage in one of my art journals. So you can always use it for something else instead. One thing that I really love about all of this is that we're not only going through some of our old artwork and discovering things and being curious about what we really enjoyed and how that might be brought into other artwork. This actually is from a breathing technique that I do in one of my mindful art activities and classes, where you're exhaling as you move down the page and inhaling as you brush up on the page. So that can be really fun to play with. So one thing I'm going to show you here in a moment is that you want to check the back of the artwork as well. In this case, I had writing from one of my mindful mandala preparations and writing processes, so I stopped using that one because I like to have the back be pretty clear so I can add those art prompts on there. And so this piece has watercolor and ink, and so some of the darker areas I'm filling in similar to that neurographic art technique that I've shown here on the channel. It can be really fun because then you have some bold areas in contrast. So one thing that I notice when I'm making this is that each of the art prompt cards, because it is my artwork, it's almost like creating my own visual vocabulary and library. And then I can choose when I'm going to show you the writing prompts here in a moment. But when I walk you through the writing prompt process, you can be influenced by the marks that are in your own artwork that can spark your ideas of prompts to use in future pieces. And those might be focused on a particular approach, like writing with 3 lines or using certain colors. So you can really make it personal, which is what I love. So this is from a coloring book page. I really loved that center of the mandala, and I might go back and get some more, but that was sort of what I was looking for. You can play with this also with collage. In this case, I had 2 pieces and they split apart, so you can always, Elmer's glue or little glue sticks are great because you can just easily piece it back together. I prefer working with thicker paper, but if you do find the journal paper that you have and you're using is thinner, you can always use that glue stick as well and thicken it up. So this is a larger piece, and what I want to show about this is that as you're making the art prompt cards from this older, larger piece, you really can have a series. And so I recommend cutting that larger piece up into sections first, especially if you're using a circle punch, because that way you can more easily get to everything. So this is largely with ink and marker, again with watercolors, but also with watercolor pens and markers. So if you've never played with those before, you can draw like a marker, but then add water and it turns into watercolor paints and it's magical. So this also, I'm using a white gel pen on top as well to make some of those marks over the darker contrasty areas. I'll have all of my materials linked down below if you want to see more, especially that circle punch. So this was done with the watercolor marker. So I really traced the edges first and then blended it inward. So that is a really fun and simple way, especially if you're doing a bit of traveling or you want to create something on the go, which is really nice. So one thing that I love most about mindful art activities, if this is your first time joining me here on the channel, I largely share mindful art activities that are a combination of mindfulness and art practices as a way to help me de-stress, to feel more centered, to feel calmer. It also is a great way for me to focus on my own creative healing, but also art and self-discovery. So I share a lot of writing prompts because I believe that self-expression through art is one of the most magical things. So now that you have all of your art prompt cards ready, I'm going to sort these into 2 piles because I really have 2 different sections of themes and colors and different paintings that I worked with. So I'm going to have the pile on the right is going to be more of my gratitude pile, and the pile on my left will be more of like a shadow pile. So that will influence the types of writing prompts that I'm going to do. And I'm going to walk you through some of the ones I create to help spark ideas for yourself as well. So with this one, it's use colors from your favorite flower. You can have it as a prompt of using specific colors. So in this case, using green, blue, and yellow because that's what I had on that front. You can have other questions like what are you grateful for, or having the prompt or theme of an artwork be gratitude. And so you can imagine that as you have these art prompt cards, if you're feeling a little bit stumped when you come to your art desk or your art studio or your travel journal, that you can choose 1 or 2 or 3 of these and then have them as a go-to. So that was draw or paint something you see, create a 1-line contour drawing. So really what I love about this also, when I was doing grad school for my MFA, I focused a lot on having limitations in the artwork and what I was focusing on. And by having limitations such as only using a certain handful of art materials, or only working within a certain amount of time, or having a particular theme, or answering a certain question, or having a prompt, in this case, make art with only 3 lines. When you introduce those creative limitations, what I notice is that it actually frees me up to make a lot more new, fun, interesting, creative choices that I wouldn't have gotten to likely otherwise. So making art using the word bold as a prompt. And this one, that came to me because there's that strong red color right on the front with the otherwise black and white. So when you're making your own art prompt cards, I recommend turning it, looking at all of the different shapes and images and colors that you see on the front of that card to then inspire your own prompts. And maybe you really enjoy art and nature, so you have prompts around that. Maybe you really love working with watercolors, so you have prompts around that. maybe you're brand new and you're not sure what you really love, whether it's drawing or painting or photography or collage. There's so many different things that you can explore a variety of media and prompts. And even if you know that you prefer working with oil pastels, you could also have other mixed media art prompts to inspire you. So these are a few I pulled out: beauty, what are you grateful for, earth, and make a nature inspired art piece, and just have that next to one of my meditative watercolor pieces. So I want to show you 2 ways that you can store your art prompt cards that you made from old artwork. One is by having it in a sweet, small ceramic dish, and you can have that right off of your art desk to pull them out. You can also use more of a mason jar or a jar in general that is maybe a bit deeper or thicker that you can add more over time. If it's too large, you can put something in the bottom like tissue paper, or fill it with something like sand to bring it up higher. What I love about this jar specifically is that there's a slit in the top that I can add to them. If you want to be inspired for more 5-minute mindful art activities, you can check out one of these videos here.